Senator Peter Welch's exchange with Attorney General Pam Bondi is one of those moments that cuts through the noise of Washington, because what happened here wasn't just a disagreement over policy or a tense back and forth. It was a test of whether facts still matter when political narratives collide with government power.
Senator Welch.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General Bondi. I have noticed that at various times when one of my colleagues is pressing you, you come up with something in their background. So I'll be waiting for my turn, but you don't have to do it right now. So let me get to my questions. One of the things that you mentioned, and I agree with this, that it's really tough on the various federal workforce, including our law enforcement folks, who are not getting paid because of the shutdown. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. But I also think that wasn't the whole story. There is an issue here that's going to affect Americans, whether they voted for President Trump or voted for Vice President Harris, and that is the loss of health care, where on November 1st, everyone who is getting Affordable Care Act help to buy insurance is going to get the notice of premium increases. And I got a letter just today from a Vermont family, nuclear family of 5, husband and wife, 54 and 55, with 3 kids, one of whom has acute myeloid leukemia. And the apprehension that they have is that if we don't solve this problem, and November 1 is a urgent date, then their family premiums will triple. It'll be beyond their ability to pay. So I'm assuming that with respect to the threat to health care for families in your state of Florida, in my state of Vermont, you would share that concern and hope that we would resolve that.
Senator Welch, I would be happy to speak with that family too, because there are many nonprofits that help with children with terminal illnesses, and I'm involved in some in Florida. So we would be happy to talk to you about that. As to health care, the government is shut down. It's my understanding, maybe you're not one of them, but because many Democrats want health care for illegal aliens, and that's what shut down the government.
Let me
That's
be
one
clear.
of the sticking points, and I don't know if you voted
All right. Well,
for that or not.
This actually is important to all of us, and the lament I have is that if this health care goes away, this premium support, it is really going to hurt families in red states and blue states. And in Vermont, I mean, we voted Democratic, but we have a lot of good folks who voted for President Trump, and their health care is jeopardized. And there's a November 1 deadline that is coming up. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think it's important for us to try to work out together a resolution that's going to be beneficial to people you care about in Florida and voted for President Trump, and people I care about in Vermont who voted in some cases for Vice President Harris and some for President Trump. So it's not just Democrats not wanting to negotiate. And in fact, we do want to negotiate. And that's why I'd encourage the president to encourage my colleagues on the Republican side to sit down with us and try to see if we can make some progress. Another topic, with the respect to voting rights in the letter that your voting rights chief sent out, we got one in Vermont, and it's a demand to get all the information on the voting file. And in that letter, or in the announcement of that letter, the chief indicated an apprehension about the voting process being taken over by, quote, the left. Now, do you have any information with respect to Vermont about a takeover of the voting process by, quote, the left?
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. We are currently involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a letter that went out demanding that states, including Vermont, provide all the voting file information,
Right.
includes personal information. But when that letter was sent out,
That's perfectly legal.
but there was an assertion by the chief in this division that this was to deal with the fact that the voting process has been taken over by the left. So we got one of those letters in Vermont. And my question to you is, what do you mean by the left? And do you have any evidence that the so-called system has been overtaken by the left?
We must have fair and free elections.
No, I know that. But I'm asking for the specific basis.
And we will have fair and free elections in this country.
Okay,
Senator, I'd be happy to talk to my chief. Who was it who said that?
It was your chief, which I assume you would know who that is. Here's the question here, okay? There is a point of view that is in dispute here about the fairness of elections. But you have the power as the as the Attorney General to use the authority of your office to make demands on states, and you did that with Vermont. That's within your right to do it. I'm not disputing your legal authority to do it.
Is Vermont disputing turning over the information to our office?
Vermont is, the Secretary of State is, and you can resolve that with her. But
And we have every right to have that information.
Yeah, here's where I'm going.
Why wouldn't they want to turn it
You're
over?
a prosecutor with the awesome authority to make the decision that you're going to start an investigation against a state or against an individual. And I know from your experience as a county prosecutor and as the Attorney General in Florida, you took seriously that obligation to have a factual basis before you'd proceed, right?
Senator, I take that role, I take my oath very seriously.
All right, so what I'm
And I
asking-
take fair and free elections in this
No,
country
we
very
all-
seriously.
we all
And that
do.
information, our office is entitled to have that information.
But
And we
the
are
question
involved in
here-
litigation on that, and I
Here's the
assume we'll be
question
involved
I
in
have.
litigation with Vermont.
We have a Republican governor in Vermont. We had our former Republican governor was was the treasurer for many years, and also the Secretary of State with election responsibility. What I'm asking is, do you or does your head of this voting section have any factual basis that you can point to that justifies your demand that Vermont turn over all this confidential voting rights information?
Well, it would remain confidential with my office, and you just said that you have a Republican governor, so it doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked that of every state, Senator.
Right, and I'm asking about Vermont and what the factual basis is, but we can move on. You've mentioned that you can't discuss pending litigation, and I think the committee by and large accepted that answer. But I did notice that you spoke at great length about pending litigation, specifically with respect to the questions Senator Cruz asked you about the sentencing of the Kavanaugh defendant. That's pending, right?
He was sentenced to 8 years.
I understand that, but that's on appeal, right?
We will be appealing.
Right, so that makes it pending litigation. So you made an exception with respect to
No.
the Cruz questions.
Hold on. No,
but you
those
didn't
were-
answer
those were
any of the
things-
questions that you said were pending in litigation from any of my colleagues.
Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing. You're welcome to see the transcript of the sentencing
No, I
hearing with all
understand
the
that.
gruesome details of what they threatened to do to Justice Kavanaugh and other justices.
I condemn what that person did.
That was the sentencing.
But the point here is that that's pending litigation. You indicated you're going to be appealing. It's your right to do that. And you would not, you use that justification to not answer many other questions.
Justification, you're an attorney, Senator.
Okay.
You realize that.
I do want to go back to Homan. There's a tape, right, with Mr. Homan? I mean, first of all, is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yeah, you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
You have to talk to
okay,
Director Patel. What I said is that
Let me put
investigation
it
was
another way.
closed.
If you don't know, why don't you know whether there was a tape and video?
Senator, I believe that was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you think that it is of public interest for the people to know what happened to the $50,000 that the FBI turned over to Homan?
Did you hear what I just said? That was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. That's why I said I would not know.
It's not resolved. There's $50,000. Homan has it, or somebody has it. Do you have no interest in knowing where it is?
You're not going to sit here and slander Tom Homan. The FBI and Deputy Director Blanche said there was nothing.
I'm not slamming Tom Homan. He got the $50,000.
Tom Homan is doing, how do you know that? Tom Homan is doing a great job, as our borders are, keeping your border state safe. You're a border state.
Welch starts on an issue that should be bipartisan: families losing access to Affordable Care Act subsidies. He brings forward a Vermont family dealing with a child who has acute myeloid leukemia, a life-threatening illness. For them, the deadlines aren't political talking points, they're a matter of survival. Welch tries to ground the conversation in real human consequences. Bondi pivots immediately to the claim that Democrats shut down the government because they want health care for illegal aliens. That's not an explanation. That's a talking point designed to shift attention away from the millions of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, whose premiums are about to skyrocket. Welch refuses to take the bait, steering back to the urgency families are facing and the need for bipartisan solutions. But the core of this exchange, the part that matters most for the long-term health of our democracy, is Welch's questioning about the letter sent to Vermont demanding its full voter file. The letter wasn't just a routine request. It was accompanied by a claim from Bondi's own voting rights division that the voting process had been taken over by the left. That's a serious accusation. Welch does exactly what an oversight official should do. He asks what the left means and what evidence supports this claim. Bondi offers none. She dodges, deflects, and tries to shift the conversation to other states or other topics. But Welch doesn't let it go, because this isn't about partisan messaging. It's about the federal government asserting suspicion of state election systems without presenting a factual basis. And this matters. When government officials use vague but inflammatory labels such as the left, the radicals, or the extremists, those labels become justification for unprecedented federal demands and interventions. Welch highlights that Vermont has a Republican governor and a long history of bipartisan election administration. If Bondi had real evidence of wrongdoing, she would say it. Instead, she insists only that her office is entitled to the information, while never explaining why Vermont's voters should be treated as suspects. Welch's approach here is instructive. He isn't grandstanding. He's trying to pull the conversation back to the principles we claim to share: evidence-based governance, respect for states' roles in elections, and basic intellectual honesty. When Bondi invokes pending litigation to avoid answering questions, Welch points out that she had just finished discussing another pending case in detail when it benefited her narrative. That double standard is exactly what he's warning about: selective transparency, selective outrage, and selective use of the law. The final moments get tense because Welch catches Bondi trying to have it both ways. She denies knowing whether there is audio or video evidence of a critical $50,000 transfer in a separate case, something an attorney general would absolutely know. Welch calls out the contradiction. Bondi reacts defensively. The hearing ends abruptly, but the larger picture is already clear. This exchange shows the stakes of political power in an era where rhetoric often replaces facts. Welch demonstrates how oversight is supposed to work, demanding clarity, questioning unfounded claims, and protecting the integrity of systems that should never be politicized. Bondi's evasions, contradictions, and reliance on partisan buzzwords only reinforce the urgency of that oversight. If you found this breakdown helpful, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for future deep dives into hearings, political moments, and the narratives shaping our democracy. Staying informed is how we stay empowered.